welcome everybody to the latest episode of the Critical Hustle Happy Hour. Of course, I am Jerron, and here's the beautiful part about today. It's a good opportunity, one, to sit with my friends and have a drink. So I'm getting started early. I am sipping on the Eighth Wonder Brewery Viet Irish Coffee. So this is support for Eighth Wonder because I waited like a year and a half to 2 years to locate this, and then I sat on this bottle for about 6 months just to get a chance to drink it. It is what is it? It's a blend of beer, Vietnamese coffee, and then it was actually brewed or held inside of a Jameson cask bottle barrel. Luckily, everybody on this podcast or this video or whatever you want to call it will be able to talk about that way smoother than I did. I'm gonna just drink it and enjoy it. So I do want to take this moment to introduce everybody that's on this episode. I have John. I have the suited shooters, who I probably will not refer to him as that because that's a lot of letters. So I'm going to call him Alex, but that is his Instagram, Twitter, and various other locations to find him. And then also have Marion here, and we have another guest that'll pop in later. But today's episode is about. I want to talk about gun ownership. I want to talk about self-defense. This week being Veterans Day week, so to speak. I'll say this for all the gentlemen that'll be on here, except for me, have all did some service for the country or in the military. So on behalf of everybody watching, thank you guys for your service, our current service, our services, and then some. So I got to start the question off the same way I do with every guest, except for Marion, because I'm disgusted by his choices. But John, what are you sipping on today?
Going classic, Moscow Mule.
Oh, he dressed it up. It was not in that earlier. Okay, I see.
Oh, yeah, gotta keep it cold.
Alex, what about you?
So, since we are plugging local Houston businesses, I am sipping on a delightful Whitmeyer's single barrel Texas bourbon. And I've got that in a Glencairn from my buddy Tom Kelly over at Darkstar Gear, who is a holster maker friend of mine.
Let me say one thing, Marion, before I go to you. Whitmeyer also sponsors my alcohol sanitizer that I use on my hands to keep me from getting COVID. Thank you, Whitmeyer, and your large gallon of of the strongest smelling sanitizer I think I'd ever smelled in my life. But I appreciate you, Marion. I look at you with shame and disgust when I ask, "What are you sipping on?"
All right. Well, I am sipping on a black chocolate stout.
Oh,
From,
He got you now.
Yeah, I had to switch it up on you.
Thankfully, I have shamed him into drinking alcohol. But
I don't know, man. The cap is still on that. We ain't seen him open it yet.
Oh, well, that's fair.
Peer pressure.
There we go. All the cool
turns
kids
around and he goes and like takes his teeth and just opens it. I'm like, you know what, you win. My bad. That actually looks good, Marion. How's it?
It's a chocolate stout. I love chocolate stouts. This one's a cheaper one, so it's not as good as some of the other ones I've had.
Well, there you go. All right, cool. This is the first time that I feel like we're all alcohol leveled there because it's been rough the last couple of weeks. I've been drinking. I went soft the first week, and then the ladies outdrank me with real hard liquor. Last week, I drank hard liquor, and everybody else was like, I'm drinking water. So at least you guys came prepared. But two of the three of you I've gone out to drink with, so I expect a lot from you guys. Marion, we have not had the privilege, but we will one day.
Actually, at the restaurant, I poured some of the minis in my cup.
I mean, we was drinking mimosas. Like, that's not really like I didn't want to put it out there, but I had a mimosa. Like,
yeah,
I wasn't thugging.
That's breakfast.
You know, I got the bar. I got the bar set up.
Oh yeah, I know you do.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that later. Let me get to it because alcoholism is not what we need to talk about. So, again, I want to thank you guys for being on the show, and like I said, I do want to really just touch on a few different things about gun ownership as well as self-defense. I think one of the things that I want to define first is in the idea of self-defense. What does that really mean to you guys? You know, just outright kind of a definition in your thought. John, go ahead. Since you're to my right, clockwise, we'll do it that way.
Right on. So for me, it's more or less being prepared more than just the self-defense. Because honestly, when you own a firearm or anything of that nature, that you want that to be the last resort. You want to try to be able to de-escalate a situation by any means necessary and let that firearm be the means to an end if it actually needs to be that. It's a lot of misconception about people wanting guns to just go out and do stuff or to have it, if somebody runs into my house, I'm just gonna grab the gun. Yes, you can, but anybody who's been around firearms or owns firearms will tell you that you don't want to go that route. You want to try to de-escalate the situation or put yourself in a situation that never happens.
Okay. What about you, Marion?
I'd say protecting myself, protecting the people around me, making sure no harm comes to them, and executing that by any means necessary, whether it's with a gun, my hands, or an object around me. But I would also, like John B said, that's the last thing I want to do. Definitely is get into it with somebody. So I'd rather de-escalate when you can.
I get it. What about you, Alex?
So, I think that's something that a lot of folks need to kind of understand, that you've got self-defense and you've got personal protection, and they're kind of two halves of the same equation. For me, I try and take a very holistic approach to it, because the kind of brief analogy that I try and use when I'm explaining this to people is, whenever you walk through your front door at the end of the day, did you get home safely because of proactive steps that you took? Or did you just walk through that door safely because you weren't the slowest gazelle that day? So it's a matter of just internalizing the responsibility for that, especially given the fact that, I know we're going to get deep into this, but I shot my first gun in summer camp when I was a kid, and I've been carrying a pistol since I turned 21 and legally could. But there's a lot more facets to it than just the gun, which is what a lot of people fixate on. I won't go into that diatribe just yet.
Okay, that's fair. Funny thing is, I think I shot my first gun at camp too, oddly enough. And I was like, why are we doing this? What are we shooting at? And then you realize you don't know how to shoot, so you shoot squirrels at the ground. Basically, I'm just shooting. I'm hitting a target, but everything's hitting the ground. But you kind of brought in the first thing. So I'll ask Marion, when was the first time you actually held a gun and shot it?
It was in Boy Scouts, actually. We were shooting little .22 rifles, and I've been fascinated with them ever since then.
What about you, John?
I mean, you know where we grew up. So
time out. Do not incriminate yourself. Was it a concrete summer camp that you learned?
Sure. Yeah.
So you kind of froze there, John. I don't know.
Now is the time to screen cap that and then just meme it later.
Yeah.
Right.
Hold on. Okay. Well, I don't know what happened. Well, he's moving slowly.
No.
All right, John. You should just talk.
Oh.
Yeah. Go ahead, John.
Wow.
You were saying?
I just lost internet and then came back. All right. So aside from that, I think my first reintroduction to actual proper firearms handling is fired night. There, can you hear me?
Yeah, we just knew you did proper something somewhere and then it went away.
All right. I don't know. Hold on. Let me see. Let me check one thing really quick.
All right, we're gonna come back to you, sir.
Okay. Yeah, lock out my screen.
All right. So, with that being said, because that's the beauty of live streaming, basically, I think that it's interesting that a lot of your first introductions to, I think, how you view guns or how you view self-defense really does come at the very beginning of as for a guy or for a boy, it's really where you grow up or how you grow up or the opportunities that come. I think to John alluded to a point that we grew up in LA, or I grew up in Compton, he grew up in LA. He's actually my uncle. That's a whole nother story and conversation. But I know that how we were raised around guns, because people had guns. It wasn't like there were no guns, obviously, but they were more so thought of as offense. They were not really treated as I'm defending myself from something. It's more so I'm going to be shooting something that's possibly shooting at me, so I need to be able to shoot first. It wasn't like this is going to protect me and I'm going to shoot the bullets that are shooting at me. It was really an offensive thing. So I grew up personally thinking I don't need a gun unless I have an intent. Like that was just the way that I viewed having a gun. So a lot of times,
to do something bad.
it was like I don't need a hammer unless I'm going to go hammer something. Like it just, other than that, I'm fine. Also in California, the idea of just driving around with a gun didn't seem like the right thing to be doing. So, for me, that's how I grew up thinking about guns. Moving to Texas, complete culture shock when it comes to just weapons in general. But I think that living in that environment and having that view of guns, it more so for me, it made me more aware of the area when I'm in a location and kind of reading the room of saying, you know what, it could possibly happen in here, and I am not prepared for that to happen, so I should leave. And being able to walk out of situations, or as we say a lot of times, just go ahead and take that loss that day. You go and I'm gonna just go ahead and I'm not gonna be a victim, but I'm also not gonna be the winner and survive the interaction. Johnny, you back there?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, pick up. Proper handling guns.
All right, so when I joined the military, obviously I learned proper handling of firearms there. Pistol, shotgun, rifle, so on and so forth. And believe it or not, I didn't actually start owning until about a year ago. I felt it to be a necessity as I was armed up more, and it just came down to proficiency to be able to do my job and protect the people around me if necessary while I was armed up.
It's funny. I'm gonna just jump in and say this because since getting married, it's the only time in my life I've really thought about I need to really own a gun. Because in my mind, now I have somebody that I have to be concerned and protect. And though I may be prepared to make a run for it, a full-on sprint, or duck off, she may not be prepared for that. No, I mean seriously. Like I've been in enough situations where it's like, oh, it's guns. I automatically, naturally know how to hit the ground and figure out where I need to go. However, that's not a normal thought pattern for the average person. So, you see those movies where somebody's grabbing somebody to pull them down or people freeze in action. Like, I know I don't freeze. So it's kind of like, oh, I need to think about this other person, how they're going to react there. So it's just funny you said that. And I thought about it. I was like, yeah, I mean, this is the first time I've thought about having or wanting to own a gun for any real purpose.
Well, and I'll jump in on that because what you just mentioned in terms of the fact that you have a conditioned response to that stimulus is because it's something that you've already been exposed to. Mm-hmm. Whether that exposure was positive, negative, or what have you, it's not a foreign concept to you. There was a fellow who passed away just a few months ago by the name of Dr. William April. You can find some of his content out on YouTube. I very strongly recommend everybody look it up. But he talked about this concept of parking spaces. He was a mental health professional, was a psychologist by trade, and his area of expertise was criminal psychology. And what he found is on the victim side, anytime somebody was presented with stimulus, a scenario or anything else that they either hadn't experienced before or at least hadn't considered before, that's what locked them up. And I think that's what happens to a lot of just kind of the normal quote unquote people of society is, thinking about violence is not really it's not a pleasant thing. And it's not what most people would consider a normal thing, but it's something that can find people indiscriminately. So if it's completely off of your radar until it finds you, then your CPU is going to be so overloaded that you just don't have the RAM necessary to process and actually respond to what's going on.
Right.
You get that fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, Marion. You say fight or flight. It's really interesting that I always think about this because I know Marion, you train extensively. I know that your girlfriend is definitely trained extensively in hand-to-hand combat. I always wonder, how do you view the hand-to-hand combat aspect, like outside of the gun? Like, we can get back to guns and things of that nature, but just from the physical interaction, what is the approach and mindset to that? I'm gonna add one person. Go ahead, Marion.
I would say, just like with firearms, that's the last thing that I want to have happen as well. You would have to use my hands to hurt somebody, but if I need to hurt somebody, then I'd rather use my hands first than to go to a gun in a
Right.
situation.
Okay.
But
okay.
I was gonna say, Carrie, her hands are guns.
Yes.
Yes.
No, she is. Just to give some narrative, Marion's girlfriend is like I don't know how many degree, but a
She's
black belt.
fourth degree black belt now.
Fourth?
Fourth, yeah. She's been studying since she was a kid.
All right, so I do want to welcome in Gio to our discussion. Gio is here's everybody here I know, of course, but Gio is my sophomore year varsity football coach, I think. Sophomore. Yeah, so pretty much we're going back like 20 years. No, more than 20 years. Like 23 years, 25 years. I don't know. I'm 41, so however many years ago is that. But anyway, Gio's on here. He's also a veteran. So Gio, you missed it earlier, but thank you for your service as well. You said it earlier. You are an instructor in California?
Yes, I'm a firearms instructor for the different certifications in the does pistol, shotgun, rifle, a range safety officer. But yeah, it's been busy lately.
Yeah, I imagine so. So the cool part about this is Marion and Alex are in Texas where I am. John, who's my uncle, is actually in LA or in, I don't know, John, what is that? Orange County? Yeah, I'm sorry. He traded out on us. But anyway, he's in Orange County right now. And one of the things that makes this important to me is you probably have more knowledge of just the gun laws in California. And that's usually a large topic of conversation for a lot of my friends. And when we talk about gun ownership and what you can do in California, because apparently in Texas, you can do whatever you want. Like, short of me getting a automatic Tech 9 or something like that, I pretty much have, I've seen all types of guns that I know I would not see in California legally.
That's correct.
I'll let John ask questions directly because they'll more affect him. I'm going to stay in Texas if I got it.
Yes.
It is different.
Stay in Texas.
So, John, I don't know if you have any questions directly you want to ask there just about gun ownership. And I'll get back to the physical aspect too in a second.
Oh, no. I've just, after bringing my firearms here, I made sure I read everything twice because just with my job, obviously I'm active duty and having security clearance, I don't want to hiccup with anything that's going to jeopardize that. So, yeah, I made sure I did my homework. It is a pain to deal with everything here.
You live on base, John?
No. They make the rules here. It's so odd because I brought firearms into California. They're still in the system being registered, and to buy ammunition, I had to buy another firearm just to get on the list, which gun control, but you want us to buy more guns to stay on the list. It makes no sense.
Or is that just the excuse that you used with your wife?
No,
honey, I have to buy another gun. Really, the state said so.
No, I just told her, I was like, I could either buy a gun now or pay $20 every time I want to get ammunition if I can find it.
That's the easy route, is to just buy another gun.
Yep.
Nice.
Another route is technically, when you move into the state, you're supposed to do a self-registration of all your guns.
Yes, I did, but that's been about 90 days and it's still holding up.
So you guys are saying that in order to buy ammo in California, you have to buy a gun just to buy that ammo?
Well, You have to
You
be
have
in the CFARS system. That's
Yes.
the system that California has that will keep track of all the guns we have and whatnot. But once you're in
Isn't
the
it true that you
system,
can only
then
buy?
they'll charge you a $1 fee
Mhm.
and you can buy ammo.
Yep.
And because it pays for the background check.
Correct.
And mind you, it's instant, right? But if you're not in the system, then yes, it's a $19 charge for the same background fee, but it's going to take a few days.
Yes.
Now, that's why it's always either just if you just buy a gun, then you're automatically in the system right away. Unfortunately,
Now,
here
can
in
you?
California, that went into effect. I think it was last year, July of last year, where
July of
that
last
you had to
year.
do a background check. They keep track of how many rounds you bought, what caliber you bought, and so on. That's definitely disconcerting for law-abiding citizens.
Right.
Alex, you had a question, Alex?
Well, yeah, and can you only buy ammunition for calibers that you're registered to own?
No.
I bought a
That's-
22.
You can buy whatever you want.
I bought a
Okay,
20.
cool, makes sense.
Yeah. I bought
So
the
I did
smallest
have
22
somebody
mag.
ask a question here, so I want to bring it up here. The question came from Jason Washington. When owning a gun, is it safe to say you should mentally prepare for situations so that you're hopefully better prepared for any situations that may arise?
Absolutely.
And I guess this goes into the idea of training.
Yes.
Definitely.
I mean, that's something that I can touch on because I don't have instructor creds yet. I'm looking at maybe trying to go through Rangemaster and their instructor development program, but I've got about 250 hours of formal training logged with various national level instructors. So on the student side, I've gotten a lot of exposure to it. And that's one thing that everybody talks about is basically wargaming those scenarios so that you can be better equipped to respond to it, because the less thinking that you have to do in the moment, the better. So it's really instead of trying to solve a puzzle, you're just hitting play on a program.
Yes.
And so it generally involves some uncomfortable thought process, and it requires being a lot more honest with yourself than some folks are capable of, because one thing that I'm sure we've all seen is that people tend to overestimate their own capabilities, especially if they don't regularly test themselves, pressure test themselves. So whether that's against resisting opponents, or whether you are trying to shoot like a time and accuracy standard, unless you've got quantifiable data, you don't know what you're actually capable of.
So I want to add on to that, because you guys all are actively into, I'm not saying into, but actively gun owners. Alex, you take more really a direct training route to it. Marion, I know you practice. You make sure you go to the range. John, I mean, you're active duty, so you have to stay like ready to go. But I always wonder, from a person like for myself, like I don't own a gun. I'm pro gun. I just don't ever feel a need to. I've never felt a need to own one for my own personal reasons of I don't want to shoot anybody, not unless I have to. And because laws are what they are, I just always worry about my reason for shooting and the legal reasons for shooting may not line up. So why put myself in that scenario when I might be able to get away? You know, I get, like, now that we own a home, so I get home ownership protection. I get having my wife and protecting, but even the idea of here you can conceal and carry. I sit there and think about, I don't know if I want to walk around the city with a gun, but I think, Gio, to that point, it's the LA in me. Like, you in LA, you ran into so many scenarios where, you know what, if I had a gun, I probably would blank. So in my mind, I'm like, until I know that that's not an end blank, I'd rather just leave it at home and go live my life. And if I happen to get in a scenario where somebody is shooting or doing something, I know how to hit the ground with the best of them. So I wonder, like, what do you tell the regular person that may not think about, I'm going to go get this active training to where I can put myself in scenarios? Like, how do you mentally adjust when you're not committed to be that committed, so to speak.
Was that a question for everybody or just?
That's a question for anybody who wants to pick it up. You know,
If I can kind of chime in real quick on the, let me tag on that previous question. I like to use the example of, for example, two things. I might be dating myself, but remember the Karate Kid? Wax on, wax off, right? And to the point where he didn't know why he was doing it, but it became a natural instinct. And that's what you want to do, where the gun itself is just a tool that you are very adept at using. It's just another tool. That's all it is. Driving, same thing with driving, right? We all learn how to drive at a certain point. Some of us even did stick shift. And when it came to us to a point where you didn't do it one time and then wait 6 months and drive again, you did it on a regular basis, correct? And so it's not eat, and do makeup, and whatever the case might be, right? Because it's just a natural thing that they can easily do, and that's my suggestion that people do is train, and then get yourself to the point where you train and where you can actually be put under stress, to be able to still effectively do what you got to do. Now, back to your question about carrying. So I don't think anyone here, none of us, want to ever shoot somebody. I would it'd be safe to say it. I think no one wants to shoot somebody.
Yeah, I hope not.
And a lot of times the responsibility of somebody who's carrying concealed is you actually avoid more situations. Even though it might be happening, you tend to want to avoid that situation.
Yep.
That's where concealed carry, because you don't want to be brought into a situation. Remember, it's a last resort for you. There's a bigger responsibility of. I'm having connection. You guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just kind of
I got
going
you.
out at time.
Hello?
But you're good right now. Yes,
We
hello.
got you, Gio.
Can you hear me?
You can't hear us. We hear you, but apparently you can't hear us. So yeah, thumbs up. We hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, that's it's a higher responsibility because you're trying to avoid things even more so.
That's a cool way to just end a statement. All right.
Yeah,
Right? And then,
while he's
so-
cut out, I was going to add
I'll wait till you
yeah,
come back.
go for it, Mary.
that question. The guy said, should you plan? Would you be able to put it back on the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it safe to say that you should mentally prepare for situations so that you're hopefully better prepared for any situation that may arise? I think, of course, why wouldn't you want to prepare for those type of situations? I mean, you plan ahead to pay your light bill on time, plan ahead to, do whatever you do about your day. Why wouldn't you plan on how to protect yourself?
So in using that question, I think the question, to take it a step further, is more of the how. Like, how do you mentally prepare for a scenario? I mean, Alex, well, hold up. Alex, for me, I'll say this. You said what?
I said definitely just start by researching. Start by engaging with people that are about that lifestyle and using the right sources. You can't just go learn from anybody.
That's a huge one.
Yeah, like I see all these people online that are tactical and all that, and I think you should find something that's practical. And when I say have a plan, do what works for you, because what works for me is probably not going to work for Gio, John, or Alex.
Right.
But you have to have a plan. You can't just sit by and think.
Well, let me jump in and say this. So I'm playing the complete novice in the way that I'm talking about approaching this. So to Gio's point of, like, you learn to drive a car. Like, I learned to drive a car, but I didn't go to, like, a race car driver and be like, hey, teach me how to drive a car. Like, that's not how you learn. So, and most people, I can tell you in Texas, when I talk about, like, learning to use learning to get a license to carry or what kind of firearm, like, I'll go to Alex in a second because I know how much Alex is into what he's doing. But I went to an academy and I said, hey, I'm just looking at guns. I saw
Oh.
like 5 people just pull out, like, I got a gun on me right now. I was like, you guys are all crazy. Thank you very much. And so I look at it from a standpoint of, if a person has no experience, who do they go to? Because
Definitely not.
Yeah.
go ahead, Alex,
So
you're excited.
oh yes. Well, and the entire reason why I launched the Suited Shootist was because I was running into that problem. Most of the content creators that I was finding out there either carried a gun for a living, or the fact that they were armed was somewhere between either normal to expected. Whereas for just the regular Earth people, we are not under power of authority or any of that. It's simply, I choose to carry a firearm because, amongst other things, it is the most effective tool to resolve interpersonal violence. But more to your question, where do people go? We are at this point in the golden age of quality information. The problem is that you need to sift through a lot of BS first to get to that quality information, because any jackass with an internet connection and a short haircut and a bunch of tattoos can come across as an expert. And I've had this exchange one-on-one with a bunch of people. The first question that you need to ask is, why should I give a damn about what this person has to say? And the things that you got to keep in mind are, military experience doesn't necessarily matter, because infantry tactics are not super applicable at a Walmart, in a Walmart parking lot at 2 a.m. when it's just you and some professional felon, and you don't have a fire team backing you up. Just because somebody was law enforcement doesn't necessarily mean anything, because with those large institutions, sometimes their policies and their procedures are 5, 10, 15 years out of date, because they move so slowly. So it requires a lot of research. The beautiful thing is that so much of this information is readily available for free, but you've got to dig down. Just because somebody's resume looks impressive doesn't necessarily mean much, because there's a lot of very flowery language and certifications that are basically there to serve as nothing more than marketing. If I had to point to one thing to look for, look at how many training courses that person has attended as a student. Because if they at some point decided they were done learning, not saying that it is 100% appropriate to write them off, but it's a good indicator. Because I know dudes that have been doing this for literally decades that will still pay money out of their own pocket to go to other instructors to either learn something or at least quality check their information. So if nothing else, you're very interested in what that person's kind of resume is as a student.
Agreed.
Cool. I mean, that I think you hit a very good point. One, about the level of free information that's out there, but also a good vetting process. Because that's really what it boils down to, is how much can you find out about the person training you to know that they're giving you the right information. One of the things that I've come across here that is fascinating to me is that there are a lot of online courses now of like license to carry online. And I was like, how does that work? You went from 8 hours of sitting in the classroom to, now you can just go online and do it however you want to do it. Pause in the middle of the day, have a sandwich. When you come out, go ahead and go down to your local range, let off a couple, and then we'll get you this license. So I'm kind of curious about, how do you guys feel about this online movement that's really going on now? Due to COVID, I assume, is the main reason it's pushing it.
I mean, to me, just on the outside looking in, it's like Alex touched on. To me, it's people are using this time as a money grab for firearms. They're using it to run people through, to get them in the door, get them out, get them into their classes for $200 a pop, and send them down the road. So I believe that you need to be, hands-on, face-to-face with an instructor, so they can actually make sure you're paying attention and what you're doing. Funny story, actually, let's say Friday, Monday, I just started helping out on my ship with the range. So I'm actually going back to school my damn self so I can learn more to be able to teach people more and help them out. Because we got a lot of junior people here who they freeze up. We do a lot of tray soup stuff, which is we deal with OC spray, batons, mock takedowns, and all of that stuff. And yeah, these kids are just locking up. That fight or flight isn't in them. We have to actually train them to be able to handle situations. And that was one of the reasons I got into owning firearms, because after going through a class and helping out and helping facilitate, I saw that, okay, this guy that I'm standing to watch with, or this woman I'm standing to watch with, isn't ready if something happens. So I need to make sure I'm proficient. That's why I go to more classes. I volunteer for classes, and I'm there as much as I can be, because yeah, we've got to make sure people are educated. So
Just curious, how do you break them?
Go ahead,
Oh, sorry. Just curious, how do you break them from locking up like that?
it's the way we do it. It's repetition. It's all about repetition. It's, letting them know what they're going to get into. And because honestly, the generation that we're now, a lot of the 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, they grew up sheltered. So, they don't know, they've never experienced pain or any type of physical duress. So they're not used to it. So it's culture shock for them. They just thought, oh, I'm going to join the military. I'm going to go to school, get some money for school, and that's it. But then when real life hits, like, holy crap, like, okay, I just got sprayed with OC spray. It's hot. What do I do? All right, we have to make sure they guide through, and they have to go through 8 stations. And the last one, they have to display mock takedowns with the baton on one of the individuals we call the red man, which is dressed up in a suit. So they have to strike, they have to do strikes, they have to do a takedown, and they have to actually defend off that person and several others. Some get through, some don't, and they go through again. But it's one of those things that, you kind of got to callous the mind and the body to get used to that stuff, to be able to use the training that we give in a situation.
So Gio, let me ask you this. As far as what you're seeing right now, are they doing online courses in LA? Like, are they doing online courses in California as well?
Yes, they are.
Well, for what specifically?
Well, I guess. Well, I don't know. To be honest with you, I've been so far removed. I don't even know what you have to take a class for in LA. Is it to get a gun, or what are people going to classes for in LA in regards to getting a firearm? Like, what is that process?
Well, in California, they require a firearm safety certificate. That's basically taking a 30 question. I call it the stupid test, because it's a lot of common sense, and it's written by, because almost half of it is legalese, not so much safety. And we're talking about the nanny state of California. So you have stuff that, some of it is there was one that came in this year that was very political, kind of sounded to me, but it's, and you can study for it. There's an online study guide that you download, and it's a PDF. You study, and then you go pay $25 at a local FFL dealer or gun range and take a test. And if you pass it, you get your little card that says you passed it, and then that is what you need along with your California ID card to go buy a gun.
So there's no requirement for class.
No, there's no requirement for like training per se. Up until you want to get there, for example, your concealed carry permit, depending on the county that you live in, there might be a difference of hours.
So you can conceal in California?
Yes, some places.
I mean, that's interesting, because as far as I knew, you had to be law enforcement to be able to walk around with a concealed.
So Orange County, you can conceal carry here. I'm actually going to start in January, which is the company that I'm going to go through, or the course. So part of it is online. I think I do 4 to 5 hours online, and then later on that day we meet at the range. So once I go through that, I'll have more information. But I'm kind of gathering information and preparing for it myself. But yeah, so apparently Orange County is one of those places where you can conceal carry.
I'm gonna go on record and say my mind is kind of blown right now because didn't know that I'm in California visiting you, and the guy at In and Out might be holding a gun on him. That's interesting. That's just the interesting thought. Here, I just assume everybody has a gun on them. Why not? Because you can. I think it's the reward of having no jail record or no arrest record. I'm like, hey, I might as well get one. But that's just me. I'll be the first guy with a concealed handgun license and no gun. Just
Well, and it's one of those where with the Texas CHL, when I took the class, and because I had a CHL in Louisiana, and then I got one here when I moved out here to Texas. It's death by PowerPoint. It's literally just a checkbox so that if you screw up, the legal system has documentation that you should have known better. What I tell people, the analogy that I use is that basically the carry permit class prepares you for self-defense about as well as driver's ed prepares you for the Indy 500. And the interesting part about it is a friend of mine, he and the folks over at Lucky Gunner did a video where they shot the Texas CHL qualification blindfolded and passed it. So it's not a super high standard. Now, without getting deeply into the politics of it, I don't necessarily think that it should be, because if you screw up and you do make a bad decision, there's already systems in place to hold you accountable for those bad decisions. So everybody has the right to protect themselves. Just don't be an idiot about it. But I think that's another piece of it is that people don't necessarily appreciate the depth of responsibility that comes along with the right to own and carry firearms, because there's a lot that goes into it that doesn't get addressed even within kind of gun culture at large, let alone general population conversation.
Right. So, Gio, I want to ask you a question, and I have no idea what's hanging in front of your screen. That's like the scariest thing is E.T. It looks like E.T. Okay, Gio, I want to ask you a question in regards to how many people are you training that have no experience whatsoever? Like, what does that look like for you right now?
Well, because of the COVID thing, we're reducing the limit the size of the class, but seems like there's 8 to 10 per day.
Really, they're getting trained? They're coming in to get trained right now?
Well, basically our basic pistol, our basic handgun class involved. It's roughly about a 4 to 5 hour class, and it's kind of a well-rounded. They learn about the different types, right? Handgun, revolver, what things are called. They can get a kind of a general basis of what things, nomenclature, what's a trigger, what's a hammer, ammunition, right? The different types for what calibers and so on, and then of course how to actually hold the gun, how to work the guns, and so on. And then we actually go out in the range to shoot. We actually start out with 22 caliber pistols, so there's no, especially for these people who are very anxious, who are very nervous because they've never been around a gun. And plus, we have the stigma of guns are a bad thing, and so you got a lot of people who are maybe never thought they would even touch the gun. Maybe they were anti-gun, and now all of a sudden you get a lot of people who are taking a step in this direction. And so the 22 caliber pistol, there's no significant recoil, and it allows new shooters to be able to shoot and focus on the fundamentals of shooting and not worry so much about the recoil. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. The interesting part of it is I was actually talking to Mary and I were talking about doing something that was like an introductory before you go to the range, just about getting used to the idea of holding a gun, the idea of addressing your fears about it. And the reason being is because my experience here is the minute you talk about a gun, everybody's like, let's go to the range. And I'm like, well, look, you might be shooting a 45. Everybody's like, my wife is not prepared to just go start her first gun shooting being a 45. You know, so and I talked to a bunch of my friends that are not gun owners but are curious. They were like, the thing that's kept them from going to it is there's nothing around that eases them into it. It's kind of you go from
Jump right in.
you go from okay, I want to get a gun to oh somebody's like, well, let me take you to the range. You know, and Alex, to your point, I know you're gonna say something there. They're not the average person is not really ready to go do research to go who's gonna go teach me this or who's there. They go to somebody they know, you know. And even though there's dry fire, there's all these different things, but most of the people that I've run into don't even do dry fire. They're just like, I got some bullets, some ammo, and I went to the range. I've been shooting guns since I was 3. You know, it's this long drawn out story. So it's interesting that you say that because my next question is going to be, if I come home for Christmas, I need to find out the schedule because I may want to sign me and my wife up to come do the class because I think that it's very important to get that basic introductory, like, look, get used to the idea of this. This is what a gun sounds like going off. This is what it feels like going off in your hand. It's not something to be scared of. You have the control. It's not going to fire off on its own. So I think that's a really great thing.
I think is one of the huge misconceptions is that they are going to go off, you know, just by looking at them. You know, they're laying there. So to warn, ease somebody into that, I think it's really awesome. I remember a friend of mine, I took her to the range. This was a long time ago. She broke down crying because of all the noise from this end and that end, and it was just too much for her to handle. So we had to wait, you know, for it to die down, and when it was a little bit more private to shoot. So I think that's something else to think about.
Yeah, I mean, even if they don't shoot off a single round, indoor ranges especially are sensory overload to a lot. I mean, it's akin to being at like a really aggressive concert. Just the amount of noise that's going on, plus you've got the pressure wave and the physical shock of guns going off next to you. You know, most of these places it's just concrete block wall, which is bouncing all that crap back to you. And yeah, it's not uncommon to see newbies flinch, cower, and all this other stuff. And of course, since they're generally in the minority, they kind of, you know, cow down and feel embarrassed by it because for everybody else there, it's just kind of a normal thing. They don't see other people sharing that experience with them. And so they then get very hyper self-conscious about it. So that's one thing that I've always strived to do. And I'm sure that you know, y'all that are instructors do as well, is that reassurance of there is zero reason to feel embarrassed or self-conscious. The only hard and fast rule when it comes to being introduced to firearms is safe handling. Everything else comes with time and exposure. Anything else, as long as you can handle it safely, everything else can be developed and everything else can be excused and worked past.
A funny story that I'll share because this was my experience at an outdoor range. I went to an outdoor range with a friend of mine, and he had just bought some guns, and he was like, "Yeah, come shoot." And I was like, "All right, cool." He had a .223 rifle, and that's neither there. I've learned that I'm pretty accurate at 100 yards away, so I was like, "Well, great. I don't have to worry about somebody getting close to me. I can just sit back and just snipe people off. This is wonderful. This is what I've been waiting for my whole life." But the thing that kind of freaked me out is being in a place where it's so many guns going off and you don't know where it's coming from, because it was maybe like I don't know if you guys have been to George, I think it's George Bush Park in Houston, the range out there. Yeah, it's got to be like 50 like bays or something like that, and they were all full, and you just hear all these guns going off. And for me personally, the last time I heard a bunch of guns going off, I was a little kid in Compton. Like, it's just, so I'm not nervous as much as I'm just like, this is not a place that I really want to be mentally. But what bothered me was the fact of, as safe as I am, I'm scared enough to be as safe as I possibly can be. However, when they're like, okay, now you have to walk down to the target, take your target off, and put a new target up. And the thing I kept thinking to myself is, so I'm going to walk down here where all these guys have just been sitting here letting off what sounds like revolutionary cannons. Like, they don't even sound like regular guns, because this is what Texas brings. And I'm like, okay, I don't think I've ever been as scared as I was to make that walk. And I've made a lot of scary walks in my life, but that walk just had me like, I hope nobody's crazy. I just hope that nobody is fully crazy, or this is not a moment to have an accident. Or if a backfire goes off, why am I going to be the only one that hits the ground looking like what's going on? So to your point of fear, that's just something I think that it comes over time, but it's just it's a weird place. Like, so Alex, to your point when you said being indoors, I was like, I've been to indoor ranges. Indoor ranges for some reason don't bother me at all. It's the outdoor ranges, and I think it's because I don't visually see everybody.
Well, I would also venture that it's because what you just said, your past experiences, you already have an underlying psychological trigger when you hear gunfire in an outdoor setting. There's already a context there for you.
Yes.
Because gunfire indoors and gunfire outdoors sounds very different.
Yes. No, you're fair.
So that's one. But and just to touch on what you said about, am I going to be the only fool that's hitting the ground if a car backfires? That's one thing that I cannot impress upon people enough. And this is irrespective of what kind of training it is, whether it's firearms, whether it's empty hand combatives, or any of this. Do not be afraid to embarrass yourself, because if it's one of those where if your instructor and the people that are with you there are worth anything, they're not going to shame you for it. They're going to use it as a learning opportunity. And there's another instructor who passed a few years ago by the name of Pat Rogers, who was fond of saying that learning occurs after repeated demoralizing failure. So it's one of those things where that's where the most improvement takes place, is once you have gotten to that emotionally uncomfortable space. And that's why a lot of people don't do it, is because it don't look good on the gram and it don't feel good inside.
Yeah, no, I mean, believe me, I didn't feel good making that walk. I was cool with everything else. Hey. And then the funny thing is, I'll say this to that same point. There's also this weird feeling of guns being shot around you while you're shooting a gun. And you're like, okay, wait, what are they over there shooting? Why are they shooting something so large? Is that legal for them to shoot? Because again, in Texas, I'm hearing things that sound like they drove a tank up to the bay and was like, let me just shoot this tank off real quick and see. I'm looking for explosions. I'm looking for all types of things versus, an indoor range, you might hear, last time I went to an indoor range, it was in Washington. I heard pat, 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 pat. Out there, I'm hearing boom, boom. What are you shooting at? Like, and that's one of the things that I always tell people about like gun ownership. And I'll say this, I know we have about 5 minutes left, is I've always been the fact of, I
got time if you want to keep it running.
I mean, I got time too, but I know John's got to go. I don't know what everybody else is doing tonight. But what I will say is, I know that the way I've always thought about guns is, like I said, I grew up, they're offensive. I know that they're defensive, but nobody around me had a gun unless they needed to go do something, or or keep something from happening to them, but because they were out doing something. So my question always for people, and I'm pretty sure I've asked each and every one except for Gio, is, okay, you got 12 guns. Not that you guys have 12 guns, but you probably have 12 guns. The question I always ask is, well, do you have a vest? Like, I don't understand the concept of not having a vest if you owning all these type of guns, because unless you tell me I hunt and I have rifles that are designed for hunting, my viewpoint is whatever you're shooting at is probably shooting back at you. So what's your ideas when you guys think about the idea of owning a vest?
I'm
Well-
not going to begrudge anybody buying body armor, but I will say that when you are looking at civilian defensive encounters, there's a lot of things that people can do other than shoot at you that earn them getting shot. And so it also kind of circles back to what you were talking about understanding the law and understanding what the criteria are that need to be satisfied in order to justify the use of deadly force, because you don't have to wait for somebody to start slinging rounds down your way in order to start shooting back. And it's not necessarily a bad idea, but it's also one of those circumstances where, number one, quality concealable soft armor is still not super conducive to a normal lifestyle. It's fairly expensive and it has an expiration date, especially if you're wearing it on a daily basis and sweating on it. So, you know, if you're okay, you know, shelling out $300 to $500 every 3 to 5 years, and just and that kind of thing, and adjusting your wardrobe accordingly, okay, cool, you know, do you. But it sounds good on paper, but once you delve into the realities of what happens in a lot of defensive shootings, it's starting to encroach into statistically excessive.
You know, I used to do private security, and I would have to wear a vest every day. And I can't tell you, that was the first thing I wanted to take off as soon as I got home. Like you said, the concealable armor, I had one that you wore inside your vest, so I could wear a t-shirt, you wouldn't know, but it's not practical for me. If I'm at home, maybe if I have a go kit and I can just slap something on and then go see what's happening downstairs, maybe. But one thing I wanted to end on was back to what Alex was talking about, emotion. I think, like, when I think about self-defense, I also think about that's something that I have to be emotionally prepared to do. And I think you have to include that when you talk about guns, because it's one thing to go shoot at the gun range, you know, at paper targets, but when you actually shoot somebody, are you mentally prepared for what to do after that? And then legally, you know, emotionally, do you know how to respond if you have to hurt somebody? And what do you say when the police come? I think that's important, knowing your rights and just the laws, because I think the California gun laws are crazy, and I'd be afraid to ever own a gun in California.
It's difficult. And just like what you and Alex just said, as far as like being prepared to use a weapon, kind of like, so you and your girlfriend are in martial arts. I kind of equate that as the same. Like, I think you should be comfortable with hand-to-hand combat if necessary to defend yourself, before escalating to a firearm, because then that'll kind of callous your mind, callous your body to getting to that point of, okay, this threat is kind of elevating and I'm going to need to elevate to kind of match that, if that makes sense to you guys.
Definitely.
Well, yeah, it absolutely does. And to touch on that point, you know, as you would expect with somebody with my handle, I'm not normally the type of person to wear graphic t-shirts. I picked this one specifically because it's from a buddy of mine over at Growing Up Guns. It's called The Path. And he put this graphic together as a representation of all of the various aspects that a self-defense practitioner should focus on. And it's everything from the pistol skill, physical fitness, grappling, striking, contact weapons, medical, and look what's in the center. The mind above all else. And that's really it, is that the gun is the easiest thing to fixate on, because it's the one thing that you can go out, buy, and you've got it. Everything else requires skill development. But it's not just an on-off switch. It's not, okay, I bought this thing, and now that I have this thing solves this problem. It's very much an evolving process where there's not really a definitive end to it. It's perpetual development.
You know, one of the things that I asked Carrie when I first met her, since she's a 4th degree black belt, if we were in an alley and we were about to get mugged, do I pull out my gun or do I just let her handle the situation? But I think that, yeah, like what Alex was saying, you have to have level of fitness with it. I have a heavy bag in my garage, and I guarantee you, in 30 seconds to a minute of hitting that thing, I am pooped. And just imagine how long the fight would last. You know, that could be 30 seconds to a minute of my life. And if you're not physically fit to deal with that, then you're gonna poop out.
That's why you need a good choke. You got to know a good choke. Yeah,
you gotta
like
be strong enough to
I
hold
tell
that.
I tell
thing.
people all the time. Growing up, I was fat. Like I'm not about to sit here and physically punch at you for hours. What I'm gonna do is figure out how I can choke you. So I learned like 20 different chokes to be able to say, hey, here's what I know in a fight. I don't care who you are. When you're choking, whatever you think you're right about, at some point you're like, you know what? I was wrong. I'm gonna just go on, let it go. I was my bad. And so that's what I learned growing up. Like I didn't get into fights because anytime something physical looked like it was gonna happen, oh, they knew I was quick to choke. Like I was like, yeah, I'm not sitting here boxing with you. I'm not gonna win a boxing match, but I will win a choke off. Gio, I want to tell you, you have the best trained parakeet I've ever seen in my life as a person who grew up with parakeets. Get your bird on your shoulder. Like I have never let a bird out the cage for the purpose of it might
The
fly
best
around.
what?
Is that a parakeet? Is that a parakeet?
It's kind of garbled. What do you say? The best what?
Is that a parakeet on your shoulder?
Oh,
Your bird.
no, it's my daughter's budgie. It's called a budgie.
Okay, yeah. Well, either way it goes, it's the best trained bird I've ever seen somebody have in their house that wasn't out trying to make money with birds, because just sitting on your shoulder living its best life. But I do want to wrap things up. But Jill, is there anything that you think is important to kind of get out as a message to people that are interested? Do you want to plug where your classes are? Anything of that nature?
You know, it comes down to guns aren't the end all be all. You know, it works. It may not work for some people. You know, I do like. I think it was Alex. I think that you were saying it is a well-rounded thing. I believe in that wholeheartedly. Now that I'm a lot older and I've gotten out of shape, that area has kind of gone down the tubes for me. So it's like, man, even more important to make sure I know how to use a firearm or some other tool, or how about this? Avoid defuse before it gets to that point if you can. Always be aware of your surroundings. Maybe sometimes it's just a matter of avoiding situations before they even materialize. You know, I saw some. I just figured out some questions I saw. You know, someone's asked questions like, for example, how do you prepare yourself? I'm gonna go back to, going back to football. You remember that, Duran?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, some people weren't necessarily naturally aggressive, and we had to kind of push that issue into the point to where you learn to be aggressive, and that can be learned to some extent. Um, so in that sense, some of the training where you put under stress, and you can, what I said earlier, right? You can what you've learned, now you can try pushing yourself and do it, still be able to do it under stress. Um, Someone asked a question about, I think, cleaning your guns. You know, I'm a believer. Maybe because I was in the Marine Corps, we were stressed. Always keep your stuff clean. You know, and so if you're gonna depend on something to protect your life, yeah, I want it to be in tip-top shape. You know, always cleaned and lubricated, ready to go. You know.
Right. So
But
I want to throw this question up, and then I'll go to John and Marion. And Gio, if you have something to say, I want to go back to you. But I thought this was an interesting question of just back to the subject. If you have a CHL and you have to use it to defend yourself and end up shooting someone, will the cops confiscate your firearm? Like I've heard in Texas
Yes,
they will.
they will.
I don't know in
Well,
California.
and it's regardless of whether you got a CHL or not. That's evidence because here's the thing. It's a homicide. A homicide legally is one person killing another person. Whether it was a justifiable homicide or not is what gets hashed out. But yeah, that's going into evidence.
Yeah, I haven't heard anyone ever getting anything back after that.
But that's my understanding as well, that it's going to be collected. So I'm not going to spend thousands get the most expensive gun for that reason, because you may or may not get it back because it goes to the evidence locker, and some of these police departments don't have a good reputation of making sure you get it back. I'm assuming you get cleared, right? And by the time you get it back, it might have gone to get demolished, or destroyed. So I'm like, I think I'm gonna just get something that's reliable, good, not the cheapest, but I'm not gonna go overboard on what I buy either for that reason right there.
Yeah.
Well, that actually brings me to a question. I thought I was going to let y'all go, but now you guys are getting warm, so I got to ask this question. What do you recommend is a good first gun for somebody? And I know it's going to be depending on the person, but I mean, just the average novice, like, this is a good way for you to introduce yourself into gun ownership.
So here, one of the classes that we also do is called, we simply called, for lack of a better phrase, I guess, we call it choosing a gun. And we'll bring out to the class, like, of course, in California, we're very limited. We have these I don't want to get political, but it gets me going. But the politicians in charge of California are very anti-gun. We actually are limited to a handgun roster. Unless on that list, we can't buy it. Generally, there are a couple ways of doing it, but it's very hard. Anyway, and so we'll bring out the ones that are California compliant. We go the pros and cons and features and whatnot of each one. The students take their notes, and then once we're done talking, they come up and they can actually try them, pick them up, work the action, pull the trigger, whatever, take them more notes. And then at the end, they actually, okay, I want to try this one and that one, and so a class of 10 people, they might end up shooting about 12 guns, just trying it, which is a lot better than what you can do at a gun store, assuming the gun store even has this. Nowadays, you go to a gun store.
Yeah, good luck.
It's bare. There's nothing there.
Yep.
So in that sense, we've helped a lot of people. Maybe rack and slide is not something that they can do. Even though we've taught techniques and this and that, a revolver might be the best thing for them. Even though
when I bought all the guns,
hold on 1 quick second, because I know John's got to go. John, anything you want to say before you get out of here?
Yeah, just like Alex said, get informed. Get all the information, get your ducks in a row before you want to go purchase. And get comfortable with the weapon. If you buy it, let's say you pick it up, have it in your house, dry fire it for about a month, get used to taking it apart, the parts of the weapon, how it actually works, learn about it, get used to holding it, be safe with it, and then go to the range. I got my fiance a firearm, and I think I've been home for about 2 months now, and she's dry fired it maybe 200 times. We've done laser light training. We've done every type of all the shooting targets that I have inside the house. And I have her telling me what weapon conditions are from condition 1 to condition 4, what it means. Obviously, how to gun manners. Always keeping it downrange. Funny story that I'll tell after this, and just mainly being safe and comfortable with the firearm. Again, getting her used to everything and it's going to do. So when we transition to going to the range, she will basically just rack it, and fire down range, and everything else will be muscle memory. Funny story is I went to the range about 2 weeks ago and actually got yelled at for being overly safe, because the way I am with firearms and the way that we train people is either that firearm's locked up or it's on you at all times or it's pointed down range. My local range wants you to actually take your firearm out, leave it unattended, turn around and put your bag away, and then go back to your firearm, which just blew my mind because what I was doing, which I got scolded for, was a condition for a weapon, everything clear, administrative carry pointed at the ceiling, and I was told I couldn't do that, which just, again, blew my mind because I told them, hey, or it's in a holster, in my bag, unattended firearm. So
Agree with
the
you.
reason I avoid
The
public
sto-
ranges.
The story started strong,
Yes.
and then your internet kind of hated on you a little bit.
of
But
course it did.
I reasonably assumed that they tried to tell you to do something that you wasn't used to doing. That's what I to paraphrase
Well,
it.
it was a stupid way of doing it. You never leave a firearm unattended. At the
Yeah,
range
no,
of the
no, I'm
house.
with you there. Again, as a non-gun owner, I definitely don't think you leave it unattended. But of course, I'll talk to you later because
All right.
I'm related to you. So,
All right. This has been
and
great,
just
guys.
on behalf of myself, I hope you do get it because I really want to ride in it. So,
Oh no, yeah, we're going to get it. Yeah, it's
okay, so go get it. All right, then I'll talk to you tomorrow.
sounds good.
John,
right,
did you get my
John.
text? John, did you get my text?
I did. Thanks, Gio. I'll be in touch.
All right.
All right, gentlemen. You guys take
Have a
care.
good night, man.
All right,
Adios.
thanks. Later.
Another way. I mean, I kind of went off on the class that we do, but there is also I don't know if it was said because I'm getting garbage. I got a bad connection, so I don't know if it was said already or not. But if you have something after your research, you've done some guns in mind. Maybe some friends have one. Somebody might have one, or even going to a local gun range where they have rentals. Rent it.
Exactly.
Try it out. Try it out
Yep.
first.
Because that's yeah. That's what I tell a bunch of people is because I worked firearms retail for like 2.5 years, and the biggest mistake that I saw people make was they would come in, they'd pick something up out of the case, they would handle it, and they would buy it without ever shooting it. And I always go back to car analogies because it's what people are familiar with, but buying any firearm based simply on how it feels and handles in the store is like buying a car just by sitting behind the wheel and making motor noises, but not actually taking it for a test drive. Nobody in their right mind would do that. You need to understand how you interact with the machine because there's a whole bunch of different ergonomics that come into play. And that's why there is no singular answer as to what the best gun is for somebody. It's the best advice that I can give people is guidelines and attributes. A safe bet is if you stick with a major make and model that is authorized for use by major agencies, departments, or military units, you'll probably be okay. So, because they have fairly rigorous reliability and durability standards that those firearms have to meet. So it's a good place to start at the very least. But it's one of those where don't feel like you've got to get the high-end new hotness that when you start Googling is what you see on either all the gun blogs or all the magazines or what have you, because with a lot of the professionals out there, you're looking at Ferraris, you ain't a Formula One driver. You'll probably do just fine in a Corvette or even a Miata. So it's making sure that you're finding that balance. Now, there's an opposite end of that scale too, where the cheap stuff generally ain't worth the money that you pay for it. So a lot of those lower end companies are banking on the fact that most of their buyers are buying the thing, maybe running a magazine of ammunition through it, sticking it in a sock drawer, and never touching it again. and they're treating their customer base as quality control and beta testers. Those I'm not a huge fan of either. So, it's one of those where typically Glock, Sig Sauer, the Smith & Wesson M&P series, FN, Beretta, HK, all rock solid. You would be hard pressed to make a bad decision from any of those manufacturers. Now, exact model is going to depend on your whole set of circumstances: hand size, manner of dress, morphology, how you're physically built and how you plan on carrying it, if it's going to be a carry gun or if it's going to be a house gun, and all of that. So,
Alex, one thing I always think about is for a first-time gun for somebody, what is their trigger discipline like? Like the trigger on a Glock versus the trigger on a double-action hammer-fired SIG.
Yep.
I think Glocks, I've seen tons of videos where guys will, draw, boom, shoot themselves in the foot. So I think, in my opinion, I have a preference, especially when it comes to trigger weight and the length of pull for me.
Absolutely. And that's one of those where it's a double-edged sword, because the double action trigger, and for the viewers who are unfamiliar with all of this,
and the host,
you've got on a handgun, when they say double action, it's when you're pulling the trigger, it actually brings the hammer back and then fires the gun. Most revolvers that you can think of, and like the Beretta 92 that think like Die Hard and Lethal Weapon. So those handguns, it takes a lot more effort and a lot more distance to make that gun go off. So there's a wider margin for error, but it also takes a lot more time behind it to get good and make sure that that first shot with the hammer down is an accurate shot. So it's balancing those two.
Go ahead, Jill. You were going to say something?
No, he said it on that first shot.
Okay.
The double action comes into play on those guns they were referring to. But he said it on the first shot, because it's how you carry or keep it in your home in a safe manner while still loaded. There's in other words, there's a round in the chamber ready to be fired, and the reason you don't have it on a single action is because it's basically a light trigger pull. On a 1911 platform, for example, there's actually a thumb safety to prevent you from picking it up in a hurry and it going off, because someone who's inexperienced will go finger right into a toddler instinctively puts their finger in the trigger.
Yep.
So you're talking about like backstrap safety?
I'm sorry?
Backstrap safety?
There's that too, yeah.
Webbing of your finger.
So there is a question here, and I'm going to make this the last question, and then I'm going to let everybody say their hellos and goodbyes. But the question was to each of the panelists: have you all have either been trained, or avid gun enthusiasts that know guns? But do you think with all of that, are you truly prepared for any situation? And I'll start with you, Jill.
No.
Well, then Alex said no. So Alex, I'll start with you now.
So it goes back to risk assessment. Bringing William April back into the conversation, he talks about the best way to figure out what is your best security plan is to take a step back and think, okay, how would I kill me? That way you're able to highlight your own vulnerabilities. Am I prepared for anything? No, not even close. I'm still 30 pounds overweight. My cardio endurance is not where it should be. So if I come up against, some professional felon who does nothing but work out all day and is looking to just, crush the life out of me, I'm going to have a bad day. But I am at this point, if I were to not take another hour of instruction, I would say that I am reasonably equipped to deal with 95+% of whatever life is going to throw my way. And the interesting irony of it is this: the more you think about this kind of thing and the more you actually train it, the lower the likelihood is that you're ever going to need to employ the skills, because suddenly you stop looking like food to the predators because you have a better idea of what your capabilities actually are. And going back to that lion and gazelle analogy, they're looking at you going, nah, I'll get the next one.
Right.
Yeah.
Gio,
Often
what about
hard-hearted.
you? You're muted, Gio. You're muted. I think you're self-muted.
Okay. No, the training thing. It's a never-ending thing. You never want to satisfy yourself where you say, okay, I know enough, I've practiced enough. You're always seeking that perfection that, even the professionals, if they're I think Alex, right?
Yep.
He said it earlier in this thing, where you have to continue your training, continue your learning. You never stop learning. So to answer the question, um, truly prepared for any situation. Every situation is going to be different. There's no 100% way of preparing for every situation, and it's a mental thing of being able to adapt to the situations. Um, and I think it's a mindset of to being able to react to whatever comes your way. Are you going to be 100% prepared? No, because you can't predict every single thing. There's Murphy's
Right.
law, right?
Right.
But it's one of our instructors is actually a retired judge, and he points out what Alex also just said is, the bad guys, they prey on people who are weak. They see as easy targets, and so when people start taking responsibility for that self-preservation, self-protection by taking the tools, and it's not just guns, it's being smart, being aware of your surroundings, right? Um, learning martial arts, that's huge, you know. Um, maybe learning how to fight with a knife, because sometimes in California you can't always, it's hard in LA County to get a CCW, or we call them CCWs here. Maybe having a pocket knife, a legal carrying a pocket knife might be your only thing, but different tools. The biggest one though
Right.
is your head. Yes, your mind. You know.
So that's a good point. So this is the perfect way to round this out, because I don't think I've ever met anyone as prepared for just about any situation as Marion. And I say this because we've talked a complete conversation about guns. You know what? I don't know. You and Alex do kind of rival each other here. I feel like Alex studies the rules and the laws of where he's going to determine what he can get away with. So I don't know. You guys might rival each other. I just know that Marion at a brunch and pulled out, every time I turned my head, he pulled out something new, that if something was to happen, and then there's this, and then there's this, and then there's this. And I was at a point where I was like, are you even
we're pulling
comfortable?
gear out now? Hang on a second.
No. I mean, I will say, that's why I had to think about it. I was like, Alex, you know what? You are pretty prepared. But I feel like you use more universal like things, so you're not there. Marion, I'm gonna start calling him Inspector Gadget, because I genuinely feel like he pulled stuff out of places, and I was like, you don't even have enough clothes on to have that much stuff on you. And then was like, man, I'm gonna get this, and I'm gonna get this too.
I'm insecure.
Good, man.
What can I say?
You definitely are. You definitely are secure.
I think, man, I a couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to work out with this guy who had just got out of prison, and he spent 8 years in prison doing nothing but working out. So I'm like, okay, let me go work out with this guy. I got my ass kicked so bad that I couldn't walk, I couldn't stand, and I had to have my girlfriend physically help me walk up the stairs. I got beat up so bad, and that goes to me for training. There's always going to be somebody that is bigger, badder, and stronger than me, and I'm not the baddest, and I don't want to get my ass hurt. So I do have a lot of gadgets, but they're practical for me, and I make them work with my environment. Um, like if I'm going to a certain place that maybe I can't pack a gun, maybe I can't pack a knife, but you know what? I'm gonna always have a flashlight, especially if I'm going someplace at nighttime. But I think not only should you want to learn stuff, you got to test it, and I constantly test myself and all the gadgets that I pull out. Uh, I go through drills. I can't afford to take a lot of the classes that I'd like to take, so I have to improvise. And if that guy, if one thing that he taught me from that prison workout is, he was in a box for 8 years, and this guy's jacked, right? So he had to get creative and come up with ways to work out. And I think when it comes to self-defense and protecting yourself, or your family, I have to constantly get creative and poke holes in my stuff. So no, I don't have a gadget or a strategy for everything, but I think General Math, not, I think it's Mathis. He said, you should walk in a room and have a plan to kill everybody in there and get out. And everywhere I go, I look at everybody and I make a plan to kill them all and get out, because at the end of the day, I want to come back home.
Let me just say, I wish we had this conversation like a year or two ago, because I really would have been like to know, like, so when you kill me, what exactly is your plan? Because I walk in the rooms and look at, how am I going to get out of here? If something should happen, who's getting shot first, and how do I get out? And that's how I assess my position in the room. That's how I make decisions on where I'm going to stand, where I'm going to sit.
Yeah.
It's like, I need to be able to get out of here, because to Alex, to your point, I don't have to be faster than the person trying to kill. I just need to be faster than the person next to me there. Yep. And I thank you, Gio, for your lessons on the line, because I'm pushing people out the way and sweep technique in my way to the door. That's just what's going to happen. It is not much anybody can do about it.
Before we wrap, especially since Marion brought up flashlights, I want to share this, because this is literally the closest that I have personally gotten to a violent confrontation in my life. It was when I was in college. I was in New Orleans, Louisiana, and it was St. Patrick's Day weekend, and a buddy of mine and I were walking from a friend's house where we had just had dinner back to campus. And we were walking along the main drag, where basically between campus and the bars. So this was prime hunting ground for, drunken college students. For whatever reason, I had this tendency that I would walk down the middle of the street as opposed to on the sidewalk, because my thought process was, I will see cars coming, and if somebody needs to approach me, I've got more time to identify that. Off from one of the dark alleys, which if you've ever been to New Orleans, you know that there's plenty of them, because the streets are jacked up and the street lights don't work. I heard the words that no good conversation ever starts with, which are, "Hey, let me talk to you for a second." Now, I was just recently turned 21. I don't think I had purchased a handgun yet, or if I had, I didn't have my carry permit yet. But what I did have was this shitty $30 Chinesium gun show special flashlight in my pocket. I pulled it out. I lit the dude up. I may as well have pointed a shotgun at this guy with how fast his hands flew up. Hands went up. He starts stammering, pulling his shirt up to show me his waistband, asking me if I'm a cop and all this. I have no doubt in my mind that dude was looking to roll me and take my wallet, if not worse. But that simple, popping him with a light, and it wasn't nearly as bright as this. I mean, it was probably no brighter than the flashlight that most of us have on our phones now. And the fact that I had the presence of mind to do that is what kept me from being selected. So that is kind of the last thing that I would want to leave the viewers with is, especially with your audience, not everybody that is interested or has a concern about personal protection and self-defense, they're not all gun people. And I don't want that to be the limiting factor, because, I mean, yes, it is the optimal solution. It's the most effective one. But if that's just not your thing, or if it's just prohibitively expensive that you can't shake that right now, guess what? A $12 can of pepper spray from a good quality manufacturer like Palm or Saber Defense is a great way to go about it. Chuck Haggard calls this something between a harsh word and a gun. And all my friends that have worked correction or law enforcement will tell you that dudes, when the cops bust this out, tend to change their behavior pretty quickly, because this sucks. You know, John was talking about his trainees that were just getting short-circuited by pepper spray. And the nice thing is this can go places that guns can't. Same thing with a decent quality flashlight. And between the two of those, you know, the pepper spray is $12. A decent quality flashlight will run you, you know, entry level 50 to maybe 100, depending on how much money you want to spend. So you're not in for a ton of money. And those two tools, along with a little bit of awareness, will help you navigate and avoid a good chunk of whatever you're going to run into, as long as you're just a normal person and there's not somebody out there that's looking to do you harm by name, and you're not engaged in some kind of criminal activity. The other flip side of that is, like I was saying, there's a bunch of good information out there. Most of it's free. Some of it isn't. A couple of books that I want to recommend on the legal side: Straight Talk on Armed Defense by Massad Ayoob. This guy is basically the godfather of self-defense law. And if you have the ability to take his class, absolutely do. But for $20, this is a great high-level primer, and it covers a lot of different bases. Marion, you were talking about that dude that was fresh out of jail who was kind of giving you a peek behind the curtain. Another guy that's done that is a fellow by the name of Varg Freeborn, and he wrote the book Violence of Mind. This guy grew up in drug culture and went to jail for, I think, 5 years, a federal prison for 5 years, and grew up in that felony culture. Now he is peers with some fairly well-respected tactical trainers, and he is kind of giving us the cheat codes and the insight behind that side of society and that culture.
It's a whole different mindset.
So
on the mindset thing, I don't have a hard copy of it, but Gavin DeBecker's The Gift of Fear is something that should be in everybody's library, because especially in our society, sometimes we're overly concerned with being polite at the expense of our own security. And the main focus of this book is listening to that little voice inside of you going, hey, something ain't right, and just understanding how to actually listen to that. The last one is, if people are interested in the firearm side of things, Tom Givens put together a great kind of ABC primer on concealed carry. This is probably the most holistic book that I've found. It covers gear selection in terms of firearms and holsters. It covers the law of self-defense. It really touches on all the bases. So, you know, for $100 worth of gear and cumulatively maybe $100 worth of reading material, you can cover your bases pretty effectively. And all of this, maybe minus the pepper spray, can go just about anywhere. So if self-defense, if personal protection is an interest and a concern of people, don't feel like if guns aren't your thing or if they're not accessible to you, that you don't have any options. There's a whole bunch that can still be done. So, you know, it's one of those where people get fixated on the guns because they're fun and they're cool, but it's only one part of the puzzle.
Well, let me say this, Alex. So I do want you to give out your content, because you do put out content at the Suited Shooters. So it's right there on the screen, but I know you can tell everybody what you do and where they can find you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
that was you, et cetera.
So all the major social media platforms except for Twitter. I never wound up, kind of delving down that sinkhole. But the Suited Shootist on Instagram, on Facebook, and on YouTube. I've got a WordPress blog that I'm really need to reinvigorate as well, where some of my original content started before I went the video route. But it's one of those where that's my focus, is not kind of the tactical lifestyle of living every moment preparing to confront that professional felon. It's living a good life, and I happen to carry defensive tools along with me, and finding that balance, because especially in my 20s, I was that dude where it's like 2 is 1, 1 is none, and how much is your life worth, and blah, 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 blah. And I was so one note and uninteresting that, like, if I met 20-year-old me now, I'd punch myself in the face.
Well,
Now I like to travel internationally. I like to go to bars. I like to go to museums. I like to go a bunch of places where I can't take a gun. Now, given my druthers, I'll bring one wherever I can, but I don't let that limit my life experience.
fair. Marion, anything you want to say before we go away in your purple rain outlook that you got?
Rain.
Yeah.
Anything is a weapon. Anything can be used as a weapon. But I'd say my mind is my biggest weapon. That's the hardest weapon I have, because
Yep.
my flashlight, my knife, all that stuff. That stuff could fail me. And I'm pretty sure if something bad were to happen, it's not going to be when I expect it or when I'm the most prepared for it. So I'd say make a plan. Always have a plan. Watch your six, because if you don't, you never show your plate to a wolf. And this world is full of wolves outside. And if you think that you get to go about your day and nothing will ever happen to you, you have a normalcy bias, and you're just prey for some wolf to come and bite you.
That's fair. The wolves and yeah, I don't have nothing for that. That's good. I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna let you go back to your Prince Purple Rain. Gio, you wanna close us out with anything you want to let people know, or any messages that you think are important to say? And you're on mute. You muted yourself. Don't do it. Don't do it to yourself. I do it in meetings every day.
No, these guys, Alex, you. It seems like I'm a little bit older than everybody here, but I'm happy. It makes me happy to see that people have continued in their learning and educated themselves and grown. And that's what this is a good example to follow. It's a never-ending thing, and that's what my recommendation is to everyone who might be considering purchasing a gun. Just remember, though, it's a tool. It's like a knife, flashlight, whatever you can, a walking stick, anything. But everything's a tool. The biggest thing is the mindset. Enjoying life, but always know that there is evil in this world.
That's fair. Well, I thank you guys all for taking the time out. Alex, I appreciate you being the you're third right now of people who have finished a bottle of something on the show. So much respect.
Finished 2 bottles of wine.
Yeah, we don't count water.
That doesn't count.
Gio finished a meal, so I respect
what's
that.
wrong with water?
What you said? What's wrong with water? It's
That's
a happy
all I
hour.
drink, man.
No,
Really?
Yeah, but
Never touched this stuff. Fish
Here's the
fucking
funny
it.
part. Even though my 4 years in the Marine Corps, the guys always try this one. It's never acquired a taste for it. Never did. And so
fair.
all I drink is water.
But you at least had a meal with us. So it's like I look at it like, hey, you didn't drink alcohol, but you had a meal. You broke bread with us, so it's fine.
All right, we'll go there.
So, but yes, I thank you guys all for doing the show and taking the time out. I feel like people got a lot of good information, a lot of different perspectives, and that was the main thing that I wanted to have in this happy hour especially. I didn't even when I asked you guys, I didn't really think about it being Veterans Day this week and how all of you guys are veterans. So that's actually pretty cool. It works out. So yay me for just figuring out the right time to put something together. But like I said, I think the things that came out of this that are important, just to kind of bring it into perspective, is that if you are going to go the route of owning a gun, you should take the time out to do some research. You know, don't just go out and buy a gun because whatever's going on in the world triggers you. Do some time, do the research. Alex has told me, multiple people have told me this, but Alex tells me more times than not, if I'm thinking about buying a gun, just go rent one, go rent it, go shoot it, borrow one, you know, figure out what works for you. So I think that's very important. People don't think about this with gun ownership, but continuous education is very important, you know, and do it at your level. Maybe the only thing that you can't afford is looking online at a YouTube video. Well, do some research on who are the people to look at and research them and look at that and get information there. Definitely, I think everybody should, if you own a gun, definitely dry fire. It's a way that you don't have to go to the range. You're not wasting ammunition, and you get used to firing and pulling the trigger on your gun and how your gun feels. So, again, I am not a gun owner, but it'll probably happen within the next 3 to 6 months, I would assume, just because you think about things differently. Oh, you find stuff all the time, but again, to that point, you know, we didn't get to talk about different guns and all that, but ultimately, when you're in a place of preparing for, at least in my opinion, in a place of preparing for something to happen from a defensive standpoint, your goal is that it works when you need it. That is really what it boils down to. Is it going to work when I need it? And for me, that's the thought. I don't think I'll ever be the person that fires 5,000 rounds through a gun, or, you know, some large number that is probably the average or standard, because I technically don't like ranges. Like, I just, not my idea of let's go out for a day and it should go to the range. But I just look at it from a standpoint of, at some point, you want to protect yourself and you want to make sure you're efficient at it. And you have to do it at the best level available to you. Alex, I bought pepper spray. When you told me about pepper spray, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get this because I don't want my wife to shoot me by accident. So I'd rather her pepper spray somebody and...
You can apologize for pepper spraying somebody.
Right. You can apologize there. And I know me well enough to know that if pepper spray can at least slow the person down enough, I can react enough to be able to get to whatever that weapon is to diffuse that situation if I'm at a loss there or get away. So I thank you for that tip in general. But Gio, I know you want to say something, but I just want to say again, thank you guys. And Gio, if you definitely, like I said, if you want to plug where your classes are in California, because as a Californian, I get a lot of Californians. I'm definitely going to try and do it if I come through for Christmas, to go take it, because I got 4 or 5 hours to learn something.
Well, real quick, I just want to jump in. You know, one thing that's kind of unfortunate that I've noticed in the gun community, so to speak, you'll find that some people are very opinionated, and sometimes to the point where they'll come down on, let's say for example, we got somebody who's like all about Glocks, and he'll come down on this other one like it's trash. I mean, very opinionated opinions for some reason. And I like to tell people, look, these are the pros and cons of each one. Let the person do their own research, decide for themselves. Take what people say with a grain of salt. Oh, I'm going to look into that. You know, do your own research. As far as where, you know, my plug, I don't really have a plug. I mean, I work at a range part time at a shooting range, and I'm actively one of the instructors for Shoot Safe Learning, which is a school that, you know, that does that home defense.
It was Shoot Safe Learning, is what he said.
ShootSafeLearning.com. It's not my, you know, I'm just one of the instructors, and you know, and there's different classes, there's different levels of classes, you know, and it's just an opportunity for people to, you know, use for whatever can help them, you know.
Cool. Well, again, guys, I appreciate it. I'm going to wrap up here, but thank you again for taking the time out. And with that being said, I'm just gonna randomly give myself a self plug. So here it goes.